Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poems of Emily Dickinson contained within the Johnson edition. We turn now to a small poem, 88, poem number 88. This one is a fascinating poem, As By the Dead We Love to Sit, and I'm going to try and make the argument that I think a lot of John Donne has been standing behind a whole bunch of the poetry that we've already studied of Emily, but you'll remember those opening lines of Valediction Forbidding Morning, as virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say the breath goes now and some say no. Notice that very first word of that poem, as, and then notice that this will be the poem here, first word as well. Now, this is a poem that was sent in a letter to Mrs. Holland, who was a dear friend of Emily's, and in some ways it's another theodicy, that is to say, on the agony of loss, and whether that loss is death or the loss of a pal, especially in Kate Anthon, will be the subject of some debate. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already studied our introductory set of comments as well as our previous 87 lectures we just finished with A Darting Fear. Now, this poem has been the subject of quite a bit of debate by scholars. Some will say that the poem is about Emily's love of Kate Anthon, who she said about Anthon was a blissful time, especially that Evergreens group. Anthon, as we've already pointed out, a pal of Sue's. There is some interesting background here, however. This is a poem that ended up in a letter of the 2nd of March of 1859 sent to Mrs. Holland, her pal. Emily will tell her friend that after looking through the Springfield Republican newspaper, she saw that Dr. Holland is about to come home from a lecturing tour, and then in some interesting ways she'll say this in her letter. She says, "Am told that fasting give to food marvelous aroma, but I, by birth a bachelor, disavow cuisine. Meeting is well worth parting." Then she makes this more serious point by presenting this the two stanzas of this poem, and it is a fascinating, I think, study in what it means to lose something. Now, Dr. Holland is an interesting guy. He wrote a review of Leaves of Grass that he calls smut in them, so that tells you something about where he was. We've given full lectures on all the poems of Leaves of Grass in our talks with Walt, now that we turn to Emily. He considered Emily's poems too, he said, ethereal for publication, and I think in that regard it's probably easy to imagine that we are trying to, get a sense of how everyone's going to perceive Emily's poetry during her lifetime. This really brilliant guy, Holland, he said, look, I just think her poetry is a little bit too abstract, and he might have been considering a set of lines like this one on loss. Poem 88. As by the dead we love to sit, becomes so wondrous dear. As for the lost, we grapple, though all the rest are here. In broken mathematics we estimate our prize, vast in its fading ratio to our penurious eyes. Now, I call this a theodicy. Remember the last of our big five: epistemology, what you can know; ontology, who you are; psychology, the study of the individual mind; sociology, the study of the collective mind. And then it's that last of our big five, theodicy, the question of loss, suffering, pain. Why must we experience loss, suffering, and pain? Now, notice she'll begin by commenting on the dead. Now, whether she's talking about the physical dead, as in Valediction Forbidding Morning, or the parting of a friendship, is hard to always tell with Emily. As by the dead we love to sit. Note the irony of the word love, right? In other words, it isn't what we love to do. However, the alternative is to bury them in the ground, and therefore, to that degree, it would be the dying we would like to be at least with them. As by the dead we love to sit, become so wondrous dear. You'll remember the use wondrous back in poem 4, Wondrous Sea, right? As, notice the second as, for the lost we grapple. Now, she's going to use this word grapple a couple of more times in poem 948 and 1221. I'll recommend that you go and study the way she uses the word grapple. You'll remember in our study of Walt Whitman, we commented on the fact that wrestling and grappling and struggle is going to be central. And I think we've already seen her referencing, of course, Jacob and his struggle against the angel, the grappling with the angel. Here, it's the same thing. if there's a single word that defines a lot of Emily's poetry, it is this notion of grappling, struggling, trying to figure out. As for the lost we grapple, though all the rest are here. In other words, we lose one person, we've got all these other people around us, but it's the one person that's lost that we most are focused on. Obviously, we could be thinking about the actual person who has died, or of course the passing of a friendship. Maybe anything comes to mind for Emily. And then she'll use an amazing adjective. In broken mathematics, using the language of statistics here, we estimate our prize. Now, she'll use this term mathematics a couple of more times in her poetry, poem 553 and 1668. Emily, of course, very interested in the science and mathematics of her day. But here notice that she's going to talk about mathematics from the perspective of what is missing or what is lost. She says, in broken mathematics, we estimate our prize vast. And of course, that's the key word, right? In other words, when you meet loss, it is so vast. In its fading ratio, that is to say math, or the rational, can only take one so far, especially when loss is happening. To our penurious eyes, this idea that we're so poor, we have no idea. Penurious, by the way, will get used 3 more times in poems 313, 868, and 1717. Well, what is it that she's really saying in a poem like this? I think her argument is that she is suggesting that the rational can only take us so far. That is to say, our mathematics can only take us so far. And it's going to be weak in comparison to the spirit, the emotions, and therefore, of course, the heart. At 2b, I love how the syntax of this poem will in some way show a certain kind of distraught mind. The scholar Lair has pointed out that you've got 2 dangling adverbial clauses to start in your first stanza, showing the state of mind of the bereaved. And the poem itself is an interesting poem to read out loud. I'll let you play the game of reading how it's as if I want to be able to just say in logical language what's going on, and Emily says, I can't really quite get there. Now, I believe that Emily is channeling John Donne's valediction forbidding mourning, as we quoted at the top of the lecture, as virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say, the breath goes down, some say no, so let us melt and make no noise, no tear floods or sigh tempests smooth. He says it to a profanation of our joys, to tell the laity our love. In other words, there's things that we understand that we're not going to allow everyone else to experience because it just can't, the language can't work out. Finally, at 3b, how to own a poem like this. I think this is one of those poems which when you read it, especially if you've experienced loss, you find yourself asking, what was a time when you had to learn how to let go of someone you love? Because, quite frankly, the mathematics was broken. This is one more evidence of how Emily just speaks directly to the human condition. It's remarkable. Thank you.